Hello, it's Dawn Michelle and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about all the things that I got up to in my tarot practice as well as just life in general all throughout the month of July 2024. So we'll start with just a quick flip through my planner. We'll talk about some of the things that I got up to throughout the month. Then we will take a look at some of the decks that I worked with and some of the practices I engaged with, and we'll wrap up with a look at my tarot journals. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. So planner things, just really quickly, because I know some of you do enjoy planner content. Also, it just reminds me what I got up to throughout the month so I can share that with you. So in my planner for July, I had kind of this Alice in Wonderland theme going on. That's because that related to a deck that I was working with, which was really fun. Let's talk about some of the things that I got up to. So Kevin and I have been watching Dimension 20 Fantasy High. We finished what I think is year one, although we have not looked ahead. And now, right now we're on this little side quest. It's something about Blood Mountain. Escape from something. It's been fun. It follows villains, which is fantastic. I love that. Also, Matt Mercer, who is the GM for Critical Role, is one of the players, and that's always fun. So yeah, we've been enjoying watching Dimension 20. Like Critical Role is like, that was D&D game that we watched, but in between, because we're totally caught up with Critical Role, so in between we've been catching up on Dimension 20, which is amazing. It's got a different vibe. I totally love it. It's so much fun. So anyway, that's been like a huge thing I've really been enjoying. So I just put a little Fantasy High sticker in my planner. I decorate my planner with things that are memories so that I remember what I got up to. Like this week I finished A Touch of Darkness. I mean, I also have like, you know, things I've got going on, appointments, videos I'm making, task lists, things like that. I do have another larger work planner for bigger projects, but this is just kind of my keep me focused and moving forward every day. This is what this planner is for. So I finished A Touch of Darkness. It's a Hades and Persephone story. Book review, it was all right. It was all right. I feel like it was meant for a much younger audience, and I feel like that's where I'm at with a lot of these types of books that I've been reading. Like I've been reading the new books that are based on Greek myths, that there's like the Neon Gods thing, and there's this Touch of Darkness. I feel like it's meant for a younger audience. Like I'm mid-40s. I feel like these are not really meant for me, but that's okay. Like it was fun enough. I enjoyed it. I did finish it. It was fine. That's my hot take review. Okay. Oh, then we were watching House of Dragon, which is amazing. So love that one. I had Lisa's birthday. This is in here because this was the virtual card that I sent Lisa, which is an inappropriate picture of boyfriend, because that's how we roll. Also this week I was working and throughout the month have been working on a thing. It's a thing I'm creating that I'm not really talking about. So I had all my D&D books out and some cozy fantasy and some related decks, and like I'm building this thing, and so eventually I will hopefully have it done and be able to share it with you all. So yeah, that's been fun. Oh yeah, so we started our Mean Girls run on my other channel. So that is where Lisa and I are playing Baldur's Gate 3. We currently have 2 games running. We have our Monsters game, which is every weekend, which is where the game that we use real cards and real dice in, and that's generally on Sundays. And then on Tuesday evenings, we play whatever our story-based game is. So we finished one game up, I think at the beginning of the month, and then we started our second game, which we're calling Mean Girls, and that's an origin character run where I'm playing as Astarion and Lisa's playing as Shadowheart, and then we have our romances, and we're playing through the actual origin stories of those characters, which is really fun. Also this week we did dice divination. Yay! Like I was so excited about that, to be able to finally release that out in the world, let you all see what we've been playing with. Lisa and I both did videos showing a little bit different variations on the dice casting system. I followed that up with a video on my dice collection, where I also talked about dice casting and reading with dice in that video as well, but I'll leave both of those linked below. And that was great to be able to finally share that. It's a PDF, it's free, you can download it, like make use of it, and hopefully you will enjoy the dice casting as much as we do. So that was fun. Then we are coming into the last week, and I guess like I just was just working. I was just working. My kids are getting ready to move out, so that's been a lot of my focus. And then this is actually this week where we're at, and yeah, just things I have going on. So this just kind of helps me stay focused. It lets me see what I've got going on. And just real quick, you can see it over here. I did set up for August. I didn't do it on camera because I just didn't have time. I have a lot of deadlines that are coming up towards the end of the year, and I just really need to like kind of focus on getting some of that kind of stuff done. So I haven't had time to do some of the extras, but I just did this kind of like floral plant thing for August. which is fun. And it just like, I just like the little bit of decoration, and it gives me a space to record my memories, my task list, and my things going on over here. I do have videos on, you know, setting these up and things like that. I just didn't have time to do one for August, so we'll just do a little flip through. I kept it pretty minimal. So anyway, that's my planner as it's set up for August, and kind of just a quick peek through what I did in July. So let's move on to the decks, because I'm sure that's what y'all really want to hear about. I feel like I played with a lot of decks this month. I had a few certain decks that I used for the fellowship, which we'll look at here in just a little bit. And I had a couple of decks that I used for very specific spiritual practice stuff, but the rest of the time I was kind of just playing. So I started out the month playing with my new Alice in Wonderland Oracle. I got the book that goes with this. It's been really fun. I definitely started out the month reading the book and working with the cards in a daily card pull, which was great. I paired it with my Steampunk Tarot, which we'll look at here in a minute. But this deck, here's the backs. This might be the Paulo Barbieri deck for me. I think I have had, and I think I have rehomed every other deck. And nothing, like the artwork is great. The decks just don't tend to really work for me very well. This one, however, I love everything about it. I would absolutely love an Alice in Wonderland deck from this creator. That would be amazing. With this art, a full tarot would be fantastic, because this is totally my Alice vibe. I love it. It's a little bit steampunky. It's got a great kind of mischievous energy to it, but it doesn't feel super childlike. A lot of times, like Alice, like it's a children's story, so of course it should feel childlike in some ways, right? But also, me as an adult can relate to this. I can relate to this energy. Kind of takes me back to like inner teenager space. It brings out the inner child in me now as an adult versus attempting to talk to myself as a child. That makes no sense. It makes sense in my brain. Makes no sense coming out of my mouth. But this is amazing. I absolutely love this artwork. I, like I said, would love a full tarot. If I could have a full tarot in this art style, that would be my jam, because this is like very steampunky, fantasy. I feel like this, I didn't pair it with some of my other fantasy type decks, but I feel like it would work really well. I definitely feel like it would work with my, what I call my Critical Role deck. That's not the name of that deck. This is the problem with naming your decks after like shows and games and things like that, because then I forget the real name. Steampunk Art Nouveau, I think is the name of the deck. It's my Critical Role deck. Feels like that world to me. I bet this would pair really beautifully with that too. I did not try it, but it's definitely one that I would like to try at some point. We'll be honest, I started out the month pulling my Oracle and my tarots. This is my Steampunk Tarot. This is like one of my OG decks. I love it. Like, look how bowed it is. It's so bowed. It's so worn. I have had this deck for many decades, and it is definitely one of my favorites. Like, look at this thing. I kind of won't buy another copy of it just because this one has so much sentimental energy to it. But these two together are really amazing. So I started out my month like really good, right? I was like, I'm gonna pull 3 cards and I'm gonna do my readings around this and I'm gonna journal about it. And yeah, I did get a journal out and I was journaling these cards for the first little bit of the month, which was great. I was using the Alice Oracle as my focal point and then looking to my tarot to, you know, give me some context around that. So we had like the Smoking Caterpillar with the 7 of Wands and the Chariot. I did get into the guidebook for the Oracle deck and I really like it. It's got, like, let me just show you real quick. For each card, it has a little bit about the story, the meaning, and then there's a key question. So I was definitely working with that energy throughout the month with this Oracle deck. But I started out the month really well with the 3 cards and the journaling and all of that. And then I eventually, as the month went on, I ended up kind of dropping off the journaling and just pulling these cards. Look how beautiful these are together. Like, these 2 decks together are perfection. I love them. I love them. These two together were amazing. I was getting some really great, supportive, but also like kind of like I've been telling my members like all month, my messages all month long have been like, get butt in seat, do the work, because I have so much work to do and I need to quit goofing around and I need to actually focus and do it. And these cards kind of like every day were just reaffirming that message, but like in this really good supportive kind of way, like, hey lady, like you have a lot to do, like there's time for play and curiosity, but make sure you make time to get the work done too. And that was definitely the energy that I was getting through these cards, which is amazing. It's exactly what I needed. I may continue playing with these for work around some of my specific projects that I'm doing, because they really sit in alignment with it, as far as being like not necessarily in alignment with the energy of the project, but in alignment with the energy of me as the project's creator, if that makes sense. In kind of a similar way that I've been using my B tarot, which I will not pull out again, but you will see in my journal, I did use it. If you want to see my reflections on the B tarot, like you can see the past months, the past 2 months, I think, wrap-ups where I talked about it. I'm not going to bring it out here, but anyway, these were really great because they felt like they really sat in alignment with me as a creator, more so than like the projects. So I love that, because these kind of represent what I'm trying to get at and the kind of energy that I'm trying to tap into as a creator of this particular thing that I'm trying to create. Okay, so another deck that I was playing with throughout the month of July that, like, honestly, I'm probably going to keep playing with. This is the Mythos Tarot, and it is a beautiful indie deck. It says it's a Persephone-inspired deck, which is going to lead into all the other things that I'm going to talk about here in a moment in terms of practice and tarot and things like that. Here's the beautiful backs of this deck. I really haven't paired this deck too much yet. I'm still kind of getting to know it. I love absolutely love the illustrations. I think they are absolutely gorgeous. I'm enjoying working with the little guidebook to see like who's in the deck and what they represent. And it's been amazing. I'm really enjoying it. There are a few Oracle decks that I would really like to try pairing with it, but as of this point, I'm still kind of just getting to know the deck on its own. It's beautiful. I really love the energy of the deck too. It has this really kind of supportive quality to it. I don't know, it feels like it's a soft reader. It doesn't deliver anything too terribly harsh, and it definitely feels like stepping into a fantasy world. I don't necessarily get like super heavy Persephone vibes out of it, because it just, like, Persephone's the fool in this deck, and I think it even says somewhere, it just says, yeah, inspired by Greek mythology and the story of Persephone, queen of the underworld. So like there's that, but I don't really necessarily get Persephone vibes out of it, and that's probably because I am actually working with Persephone as a personified deity and as an energy, and I have very specific decks for that. So it's probably a very me thing. I definitely wouldn't say that this is a Persephone deck for me personally. It's just kind of a Greek mythology deck, and also just, it's kind of fantasy. It's just fantasy world. A lot of my decks sit in that space these days. I definitely have some oracles I want to try with it. I definitely have some different readings that I want to do with it. I used it a lot for dice casting. It worked beautifully for that. I really enjoyed that whole process. I love this 9 of coins. It's so good. It's such a great deck to work with. I didn't shuffle the other ones, but since we're kind of doing review, it is a shiny gold gilded, which, you know, is not my favorite, but it's good gilding. So it doesn't bite, it doesn't hurt. It shuffles beautifully. I don't have any problem working with this deck. I really enjoy this deck. The art is beautiful. It's so good. It's so good. I'm still getting to know it, but I've really been enjoying the work that I've been doing with it. So before we get into the decks that I used for my spiritual practice, let's talk about a couple of decks that I've tried and was playing with. So I have Persephone decks. I've talked about them. I think I talked about them last month too. We're going to look at them again because I now have Hades deck. So I was trying to find this Persephone Hades, divine, feminine, masculine, sort of balancing energy with my cards. And there was a deck that I was looking for that I was like, I think it's the one, but I didn't have it at the time. So I was trying some others. And I ended up picking up the Fabio Lestrani's Night Sun Tarot. And I ended up pairing it with, and I just realized this is a Barbieri deck. So me saying I don't have any others, that's not true. This one works for me too. I didn't realize, I just forgot that this was a Barbieri deck. But anyway, I picked up the Night Sun Tarot because I was trying to find a Hades deck. Now, I will say that this deck very much fits into Hades energy for me, which is really interesting because it's the night sun. So there's a lot of like bright sun reference to it. But for whatever reason, it also just kind of resonates with Hades energy. This is like Hades on his own. It's not Hades and Persephone. I don't know how to really explain it because when you see my Hades deck, you'll see that it's a very different vibe. But this is like Hades pre-Persephone or Hades on his own, kind of like doing his own thing. I don't know why that is the case with this deck, why it feels that way to me. It could be just because that was the intention I set for it when I purchased it, because it felt like it has that kind of masculine energy to it. It's a little bit unapologetic, but it's got a great feel to it, a great read in the way that the imagery works. And I ended up pairing that with Dante's Inferno, which thank you to one of my members for suggesting this pairing, because these two are kind of amazing together. But like, let me tell you, this is a hard-hitting pairing. This is definitely goes into shadow. It definitely goes into the challenge, the struggle. It's not loving and supportive. This is like, I need cold hard truths and I need to know what's really going on and don't spare my feelings about it. And that's kind of how these two decks ended up working for me. So yeah, these two together were really interesting because man, this is a brutal reading. This is not something that I did lightly. This is definitely not a combo that I worked with just, you know, for fun, willy-nilly. This was when I was like struggling with what is my problem? Like, what is going on? Why is this particular thing, situation, whatever, feeling like, why is this so present in my life or my thought process right now? And this was fantastic for diving into that. So we have Lunar Exile looking at where the Four of Wands and the Seven of Cups came together in that energy. Like even the artwork though, sometimes like look at all of the strands, the roots, the tangle, the branches. It's in all three of these cards. We have it here coming out of the person's back. We have it here kind of circling or squaring actually this heart in the center. And then we have it here. You can see the kind of tendrils a little bit. Also water ripples kind of mimicking that in the Seven of Cups coming out around this figure. Like there was so many times that the imagery itself would tie in to these messages. And like you can see here, it's kind of doing, again, these two figures are holding something out, and then we have all of these swords kind of plunked down together, and the swords themselves are almost like holding up this flower. So it was really interesting. I spent a lot of time with just 3 cards. And that's always really telling when I get a chance to do that. Like there's a lot to dig into here. There was a lot of really big, heavy kind of shadow work in this, which was great. It was what I needed. It definitely was not sugar coated. It definitely was something that I had to come into with the right mindset of like, this is going to kick my butt. I need that right now, but I need to know that going in. So like, I can't go in with my feelings all hurt, right? I got to take this at face value at what it's trying to tell me and remember that its job is not to, you know, comfort and support. It's not a hug combo, right? That's not the job of these two decks together. The job of these two decks together is to help me get at the source underneath. And so many times this deck was really helpful for that. And I would look at the imagery and like what was drawing my attention. Where was I seeing colors? Where was I seeing symbols? Where was I seeing these repeating motifs across cards, which would definitely cue me into things going on. It was just a really interesting, great combo. And the only reason I really related, I guess, to Hades energy is because it's what's going on beneath. It's in the underworld. So now let's talk about the 2 decks, well, 3, like I have an oracle here, but we're gonna look at that one in a minute. The decks that I used in my personal spiritual practice, as well as it kind of kept coming through some work stuff as well, because I did a Dyson deity reading with my members and I used these 2 decks and it was fantastic. This is the Tarot Persephone's Garden. I've talked about this deck many, many times. I am really in love with this deck. This is my Persephone deck. It has everything that I need in a tarot deck. It so relates to her energy for me. Like, look at that death card. That's fantastic. It just sums it all up. So I've been using this one pretty regularly for the past few months. And like I was talking about before, I was trying to find a Hades deck because I wanted to have that balance of that masculine and feminine, that birth and death, and like the two together are just amazing. And so I ended up being able to get a hold of a copy. Very special thank you to the person, you know who you are, who allowed me to purchase this beautiful deck back. So I had the Darkness of Light before. I think it was this first or second edition, and it had some cardstock that I really didn't like. It was very challenging for me to work with. This is, I think, the 4th edition. Yeah, 4th edition. It is on beautiful linen. I think currently this deck is out of print, so I apologize. I've always loved this deck. But when I was like thinking about decks for like Hades energy, specifically Hades working with Persephone, it was this. This was the deck that was in my mind. And I was like, I need to find another copy of that deck because that's the one. And together they are fantastic. I absolutely love working with these decks together. They're beautiful. They balance each other really well. I did a Wither and Bloom reading with my members, and that's definitely something that I've been tapping back into. Not that full reading, because I did a full reading with a full dice casting over the top of it, which was fantastic. That gave me exactly the message I needed in the moment. But I've also been just pulling one from each on a daily basis to get a message from Hades and Persephone every single day. So I've just been pulling one of each. And if I feel like I need more clarity around that, I'm pulling my dice. So I showed my dice in my dice collection, and they're just right here so I can grab them. These are my Persephone dice, which are just this red, pink kind of gold. And then I have my Hades dice. Both of these dice came off Amazon. These are my sharp edge kind of black and clear coated or clear inside dice, and they're a little bit pokey and hard to work with, so perfect for Hades. So when I need some more clarity beyond just these two cards, I will cast dice, either from both or from one or the other, whichever one I'm feeling like I needing some clarity around. These two decks together are perfection. The art is super compatible. I feel like each really represents the energy of their deity beautifully. And it's just been a really magical, kind of wonderful, very nourishing practice for me. Occasionally, I have also been pairing it with the Flower Oracle. So I feel like, again, the Oracle in the center here with my central message, and then my tarot on either side from my deity or deities. And these together they work really beautifully. So we have Poet with composition, imagination, and play between the Maiden of Cups and the Empress. Beautiful. Like these just, I don't know, they all work together so well. The Flower Oracle from Broccoli Magazine, like I have all of their decks. They all work beautifully with these types of style of decks, with the fine art decks. But I really like the flower one with Persephone. That one's kind of just like honed into that space for me. And if I'm working with just Persephone on her own, I'll pull Hades out of here for a second, then this again would be my go-to with my card in the middle for my focus point and my two tarot on either side to flesh out that message. These together are like, they're beautiful. They're kind of just made for each other. I really haven't used the Flower Oracle for much else since I've been pairing it with my Persephone tarot, my Tarot Persephone's Garden. They're just, I don't know, they're kind of just made to go together. They really are. So if I really want to dive into that Hades energy, in terms of, again, it's different. Like this is different than the Night Sun. It's like Hades with Persephone. So I could pull all of these together into a reading as well. I could get my Flower Oracle, my Persephone, Tarot Persephone's Garden with my Dante's Inferno and my Hades. They all work really beautifully together. And I definitely worked with this one. I think I even used it in the big dice casting where I was pulling an oracle from each. So pulled a Dante's Inferno, I pulled a Flower Oracle, and then I pulled my readings with my Darkness of Light to represent Hades and my Tarot Persephone's Garden to represent the Divine Feminine. And yeah, they work beautifully together. But if I want to just tap into this energy on its own, these go together beautifully. I just feel like all of these decks really just kind of are made to go together. They really sit in alignment with each other. How beautiful. Wrath of the Minotaur between the Three of Cups and the Eight of Cups. It's gorgeous. I love it. So sometimes I do my journals as like a separate thing, but like it kind of makes sense to show you my just basic journal, my sort of tarot journal in between, because my fellowship has its own journal, its own deck. So we're gonna try it this way and see how it goes. This is my basic tarot / regular journal. It's just, I put anything that's kind of like significant in here. It is a journal from the Creeping Moon, and it's getting quite full. So for July, I pulled a card, and I pulled this conjunction card from the Wild Unknown Alchemy deck, and I just kind of wrote some stuff from the guidebook, and this was kind of just a overarching energy that I was looking at maybe tapping into throughout the month. Like, it's a card I pulled at random. It sits out on my bookshelf. It's still out. I need to probably draw another one for August. I really like that. It was just kind of something that to kind of give me a overarching energy for the month. And then I kind of checked back in with it throughout the month to see how it was going, how things were evolving through that. And I love this. It's like through the opposites arrive the infinite. And like the energy, that sort of idea of opposites really was a key theme for me throughout the month. It was really interesting. If you even look at like my Hades and Persephone, like those are opposite energies that I brought together to create something out of that. And I definitely love doing this where I just pull kind of like a single overarching card to provide an energy. The alchemy cards, the archetype cards, they work really great for that. It's a great way to just give me kind of this overarching energy to kind of look at and to tap into throughout the month. So I had that. This was one of the dice readings that I did with the Mythos Tarot and my Retro Gamer dice. I used the full dice casting system for this one. So, you know, all of my interpretations are here, and you can see the dice that I had with the cards. I love the system. I use it all the time. Then this was the Wither in Bloom reading that I did with my members. Like, it was a big one, so I have like multiple pictures here. I pulled a total of 14 cards for this, plus 2 sets of dice. It was amazing. I got so much out of this reading, and it's definitely one that I've been kind of checking back in with. It's definitely one I'm going to be doing again. It was fantastic, but you can see I have all my reflections here. Then I did a creative surrender reading. I didn't know that it was going to be a creative surrender reading when I started it. I was just like, I need to tap in with my work energy. I need to kind of gain some clarity around that. And so I used my B Tarot and my Beltane Oracle, which are my kind of go-tos for just generic work, especially community type of work, like in this space. I used my Fey Honey Wild or Fey Wild Honey, can never remember the name of that dice set. And this was where I did the dice casting over the top of the cards. Pretty much after I said in a video at some point that like I don't do that very often, yeah, immediately went and did it because that's just how things go. Anyway, so I wrote a little bit about my reflections here. Again, I have some doodles, and then I wrote down all of my dice rolls, and then I rolled them how they connected to the 3 cards that I rolled. So that's what all the little dotted lines are. Like this one connected to this card, and this one connected to this card, and this one connected back up here. So I was looking at the connections between all of them and getting that overarching message from that. So that was a really fun one. And then this is just my reflection on the month of kind of what I needed, like my takeaway as we were coming into the end of the month, kind of where I'm at, what I'm working on, what I've learned throughout the month. And then I have my list of decks that I used. So that's my just basic tarot journal, where I just kind of record the more significant readings and things that I really want to dive into and kind of keep track of and be mindful of. Which brings us to all of my fellowship stuff. So this is the guided tarot adventure that I'm currently offering in my membership space. This last month kind of kicked my butt. I'm just saying. Kind of kicked my butt. Let's take a look at the decks, then we'll talk about the dice and look at my journal. So I used a bit of an odd assortment of decks for my fellowship practice. I used the Dirt Gems and the Circe Tarot kind of together for one thing, and then my Dungeons and Dragons Tarot, along with occasionally pulling in Circe for my readings. And then I followed everything up with the Dragon Riders Oracle for my loot deck. We'll talk about each of those and how I worked with them. So the deal with these 2 decks, and kind of the reason I chose them for fellowship, was not so much because they aligned with the energy of the practice. We were in a dragon's den essentially throughout July. So these didn't exactly like resonate with that energy. Can't talk boxes, y'all. I not my favorite. So it wasn't necessarily that these like resonated with that energy. That was more the Dungeons and Dragons tarot that I chose to work with and the Dragon Rider Oracle. These I used because I just wanted to see if I could make use of them in my practice. It was really all it is. I was trying to get to know them. I've mentioned the dirt gems in a couple of different videos because I'm like, do I want to mod this? I don't know if I want to keep it. I don't know if it works for me. It just has plant titles on it and it's kind of a assortment of visuals, and I'm not sure that that really works very well in the way that I work with cards. I do have mine divided up, so it has some cards that are black and white, which I've pulled out and I did not use this time. Instead, I have the cards that had the color on them. Now, I will say that this with the Circe Tarot was actually really cool. I'm still tripping up over the fact that I have to get into the guidebook every time I want to work with this deck. And the guidebook's really cool, but I didn't find it to be necessarily super helpful for what I was trying to do with it. The messages felt a little bit obscure. And that could very well just be a me thing, but I really do like the artwork. I'm just really not sure that this is a deck that's for me, and that's fine. Like, not every deck is for me, and my wallet and my space, my shelf space thanks me for that. However, like, I paired it with the Circe Tarot, which again, this is another one that I was like, I don't know if I need this deck because I have the Mythos Tarot, which I really love, and I have all of my Persephone and Hades deck, and this is yet another Greek-inspired deck. I also have the Greek Goddesses Tarot by Ellen Lorenzi Prince, which I didn't even pull out. That's got a whole nother vibe to it, which I absolutely love. That deck's going nowhere. But I was like, do I need this one? Because like I have quite a few Greek decks now. But I'll tell you, this one's got a totally different energy. And this is the interesting thing about having so many different decks, right? They each have their own, this is really tall, I'm gonna break this down. They each have their own energy and their own sort of way of reading and communicating the messages, at least in the way that I found. So it's safe right now, at least for a little while, because I really did enjoy it. It kind of had a unique feel to it that was different than the Mythos Tarot, which was really the one that I was afraid it was going to compete with, because I do really love the Mythos Tarot. It's a little bit, I don't want to necessarily say harsher. It doesn't quite have the softness, I guess, that the Mythos Tarot has. Again, I'm trying to like verbalize a felt experience, and it's just, I'm not great at it. These were interesting together. I will say that. I did actually really like the pairings. Again, we're back to, I don't like that I'm so super reliant on the guidebook. Now, if I was totally in love with the guidebook, that would be a different thing, but the guidebook was fine, and I really like this art together, but it really trips me up every time I pull these cards out because this pairing, because I have to get into the guidebook, and it kind of takes me out of the reading, because not only am I in the guidebook, but I'm kind of searching through the text in the guidebook to go, where's the messaging in this? What's my takeaway? And I feel like it's a bit more work than I really want to put into an Oracle deck, if I'm being honest. And that's really what these monthly wrap-ups are, right? This is my honest reflections on working with the deck. I still think the artwork is really cool. I really like it. I'm kind of sad that there isn't keywords on the deck. I'm a little bit sad that there's not a clearer kind of takeaway message for the guidebook. And I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. But together they're really cool, but I don't think that long-term the Dirt Gems is really gonna be for me. I just feel like it requires more of me than I really wanna give to it, if that makes sense. Like, it's more invested in our relationship than I am. Is kind of where we're at. I did really like the Circe Tarot, and I'm definitely going to be keeping it for a little while longer. I did get into the little white book, which was great because it tells you who's in each of the cards, and I really enjoyed that. And I think I've said it before, this deck to me feels like the Greek version of the Efflorescent Tarot. It's moody. Like, I feel like it portrays the undercurrent emotionally of the situation, which is really interesting. Like, I feel like there's that whole other layer, like the Mythos Tarot, I guess this is the difference between the two. The Mythos Tarot feels like it's more surface level, and I don't mean that in like a dismissive way. I mean, it feels like more of like, this is what I'm consciously aware of with the Mythos Tarot, right? It's bringing all of that to light for me, I know these things, like I acknowledge these things, whereas this feels like the emotional undercurrent that I'm like, I don't necessarily admit to or maybe see in the moment. And I think that's the difference for me. That's where these two decks sit, is this is more of a sort of emotional undercurrent deck, whereas the Mythos Tarot, which also is Greek inspired, feels a bit more like it sits in that conscious space of what I'm already aware of, more so than an emotional underlayer like I have with the Circe Tarot. So just real quick, going back to the Dirt Gems, just because I've been back and forth with this deck, I just wanted to kind of show you all the guidebook. There's the plant name, there's a bit of a like title, which I thought about stamping on the cards. Again, that's a lot of work and I just really don't feel like I'm in the space for that. The write-ups are really lovely, but I don't feel there's like one cohesive message that if I'm like, and I don't really necessarily mean in a hurry, but like, I don't want to invest all of this in the Oracle. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I want to invest that in the tarot to that level. For the Oracle, I want it to be, in this case, when I'm pairing it with the tarot, I want it to be a little bit more on the forefront. And I feel like this deck just requires a little bit more of me than I'm really willing to put in right now. It's a beautiful guidebook and I really like the messages, but it just didn't quite connect for me in the way that I wanted to use it. I really like the deck, but I don't think it's for me, and that's totally fine. I kind of gave it a fair shot. I've worked with it a few times. I tried it in a few different ways. And while it's beautiful, I just feel like it requires a little bit more than I want to put into it at this point in my practice. So the main deck that I worked with throughout the fellowship, and I kind of divided mine up into two different categories. Sometimes I do them all together in one sitting. Sometimes I do them in two or three different settings. This month I did them in kind of like 2 settings per week, and I did sections of them. And so for the first section, I was using the Dirt Gems and the Circe Tarot, and for the second section, I was using the actual encounter. I was using the Dungeons and Dragons Tarot. This deck is one of my favorites. It's one of those decks that I forget how much I love it until I get it back out. Like, look at this, beautiful. I've edged mine in yellow just because it's gorgeous. This kind of reminds me a little bit of the Mythos Tarot, but like rather than being set in a Greek world, it's set in a D&D world, which I absolutely love. And I'm sure y'all have figured out by now, like I'm a nerd where it comes to that. So like this deck is amazing, and it's D&D, and I've mentioned that before. Like, it's actually, I relate this deck more to Dragon Age, which is a video game. I have the Dragon Age deck too. Like, it's a whole mess of things in my brain, right? The art style feels more like Dragon Age, but the context of this deck is based in D&D. And so, like, it works beautifully. Like, I just love this deck. It's one of those that, like I said, I forget how much I love it until I get it back out again. And I'm like, oh yeah, this deck is amazing. So I used this deck for all of my encounters. I did end up occasionally pairing it with the Circe Tarot just because in the way the encounters work, in the way sometimes I was pulling in other decks. So I was using the Circe Tarot for my companion and my pet for their deck, and then I was using this as my deck. It's just one of those all-around great readers. I mean, it definitely sits in a fantasy world, obviously like D&D based, but like I find that I can use this deck for just any sort of reading. I mean, it works beautifully for the Fellowship because that is definitely a narrative-inspired journey, so it worked great along with that story. It had a great vibe. It's a little bit, you know, we were in a dragon mountain, so it's just a little bit of a fire energy here. I didn't end up really pulling in any dragon decks besides the one Oracle, which was really interesting, but this one's a great one. I did actually get into the little guidebook too. The guidebook is just really super short and sweet. We have a little bit about the card, and then the thing that I love about it too is like there's also like a little kind of role play narrative element to each of the cards. So like for the 8 of Strength, it says, during a lightning storm, the adventurers see an entrance to a cavern. It is home to a coven of hags. So that's interesting. Like there's more that you can layer into this deck, and you can definitely use it in role play narrative adventure as well. And this is one of the few decks that I keep in the box because I really like the box. It looks great on my shelf. So the last deck that I worked with in the Fellowship is the Dragon Riders Oracle. And this one I used as my loot deck, and it was just fun. Like, it was just a fun one. Because I realized kind of I didn't have a dragon themed deck in the Dragon's Den, which is fine. You do not need to have thematic decks to work in the Fellowship. It's just fun when they align sometimes. I do not understand the backs of this deck. I'll be honest, like from a design standpoint, I don't understand it. It's like all pale and pink and starseedy, and then we have dragons. And I mean, I guess I get it because there's like gods and goddesses in this deck, but it just like the vibe is it's much richer, much darker than that. Anyway, that's just me being a design snob. This deck was fun. I just like played with it a little bit. We have a god and a dragon. There's a message on each of the cards. The artwork is not really my favorite, but it's like, it's a cute concept. There's a few cats in it. It was a for fun one. I pulled it as my loot deck. So at the end of the week, I pulled to see what dragon and divine energy, I guess you could call it, what their message was for me in terms of loot. And so it was a fun one. Full transparency, this one was sent to me for review. This is my review of it. I probably would not have bought this deck just because of the artwork, but like, it's super cute. It's fun. I mean, like, this one's really cool. Can't pronounce half the dragon names, but like, I like that energy. It's just the artwork that's a little bit of a miss for me, but I really like the concept and the energy of the deck. Let's see, I didn't even get into the guidebook. Like, I'll be honest, because you really don't need it. So we have a little bit about the card, like what we're looking at on the card, which I really appreciate. That we have a message from the person or the divine entity being on the card, and then a message from the dragon. And that's really cool. I do like that. I didn't actually, like, I remember reading through it some when I was playing with this with my members. I didn't actually get into it at that level, working with it in the fellowship, but like, that would be really fun just to pull a message from a dragon and its writer, I guess, to kind of take with you or to add to a reading. And it was a fun one to play with. Alrighty, so just real quick, getting into my dice box, we're gonna do this really quickly because it's the same dice that I used last month, because they did actually work well with what I had going on. I do not have my Ember Stone in here yet. I do need to get one and add it. So again, I was just using the same dice, these little white ones. These are my dice that I use whenever I'm rolling for my companion, which is Finn. Finn is right here. And then I have my Guardian dice, which is the black and white ones that I use whenever I am working with my Guardian, which is Ani, and this is my representation of Ani here. Then for this particular month, if we did the Weaver's Fair, we got a Displacer Beast kitten who serves as a pet. And I'll just show you this right here. I don't even know if it'll focus on him. He's so tiny. This is a little Displacer Beast kitten minifigure that I bought just plain painted off of Etsy, and then my youngest partner painted it, and it's fantastic. Isn't that amazing? So this is my little representation for my Displacer Beast kitten, whose name is Cantrip. So for Cantrip, I was actually just using these dice, even though they don't like necessarily match my little green and black Displacer Beast, but they match kind of the cards that I was using, because again, I was using the Circe Tarot for Finn and Cantrip, and then for myself with the Dungeons and Dragons Tarot, I was just using these kind of red maroony ones. Again, the same ones I was using last month because they fit. I will be swapping them out for August because I have a whole different vibe going on for that month. All right, so finally, let's wrap things up with a look at my Fellowship Tarot Journal. So this is where I'm keeping an entire record of my journey so far this year. And for July, we were in the Dragon's Den. So that was chapter 7. So we had 4 kind of unique encounters making our way through this cavern. Basically, we had to come into the cavern. There was a lot more narrative this time, just because that's the way it worked with the particular story. It's not always the case, and kind of what we focus on changes a little bit month after month, depending on how deep you want to go with the readings and the work. So I had the narrative here. We had our question coming into the encounter. I pulled cards around that, and then if you had the companion and the pet, you could pull cards around them. So I pulled cards for Finn and Cantrip. Then we had the actual encounter, and you'll see that this one, like, it was kind of larger encounters. There was a little bit battle-esque in terms of how we were working through it, a little bit of puzzle solving. There was an option to add runes into the work. I didn't do that this particular month. I just used the dice and my cards, and again, having my loot. And I just kind of did some stamping and some washi. I have my Critical Role washi I was using this month. It says, how do you want to do this? Also had the D20 Critical Role washi, which is fun. So coming into the next week, we had the lava flow, which is where we had to try to get across this lava river, essentially. And that's kind of like looking at, like, how do we face our doubts? How do we conquer our doubts when we have them. Like we have these moments where we're like, can I do this thing? And this crossing the lava kind of represents that way of how do we meet those challenges? How do we face those doubts? How do we cross that river that's constantly moving and turbulent and looks dangerous and scary and all of that? But how do we actually combat that? And that's kind of the underlying of the experience here. I do try very hard to make sure that there is a personal growth layer underneath the experience. It's there like in the back of my mind, and what I try to express through the narrative and through the actual encounters is how do we work with those energies? How do we pull those energies into this work that we're doing here, and how does that reflect in our real life? So I do try very hard to layer that in. I know it's not always something that people get, but like it's something that I try to incorporate in there, and it's underneath it. So like if we go into the echo chamber. So for this one, where we're like, we have this power, right? We cross this mighty lava river. So we have this power already within us. What if we actually just sit in quiet and sit in the silence and we reflect on that energy? And that's kind of what this week represented, of going into that kind of silent reflective space of, I know I can do this. I know I can move forward. I have moments of doubt, but they don't have to determine, you know, what I'm doing moving forward. I don't have to let that stop me from the adventure. And so that was kind of the undercurrent of this particular week. And then we had finally facing the dragon, and this was all about like calming the beast and getting the firestone that we're after to complete our overarching adventure that we're doing. And so that was great. I had quite a bit of narrative around that too, kind of wrapping that up. And anything that's in brown is actually just in the PDF, so I just transfer it down here. The PDF is written in third person. I write it in first person because I'm using this as like, this is my journal through my adventure, so everything's written in first person. And then we just have going into August, we're gonna go through the Starlight Portal, and that's all about liminal space, which is going to be really fun. I'm really looking forward to that one. And I've already got my deck selected for that, so that's exciting. So there you go. That is a look at what I got up to in July. We looked at my planner. We talked about the decks that I worked with throughout the month, took a look at my journals, talked about the fellowship and the adventure that I'm having through that space, and the decks that I worked with there. As always, you'll find links for everything I've shown here in the description box of this video. I hope that you all had a wonderful July, and I wish you many blessings moving into August.